I'd say one of my rules for innovators are go slow up front and everything downstream goes much faster. And this gets back to jobs thinking and outcome driven innovation.
Well, welcome to the Product Quest podcast. Thanks for joining us on our journey to better understand innovation and product strategy. My name is Scott Burleson, and joining me as always, my co-hosts Jan Vermouth and Jonathan Edwards. Today we welcome our very special guest, Mr. Rob Schade. Rob was the second employee of the most well-known consultancy for jobs to be done, Strategyn. He built it into a global firm with offices in 6 countries, turning Tony Owick's brilliant ideas into a successful business. Today, he's the Chief Customer Officer of Strategyn, where he leads their business development efforts. I should add, though, that along the way, he's had some pretty cool and unusual experiences, such as being a nightclub owner in New York City. But beyond being a great thinker and jobs to be done and builder of business, Rob is a great friend of mine with whom we've had many adventures. Maybe we'll touch on 1 or 2 of those as we go here. But I can personally vouch for his good taste in movies, music, and food. Rob Schade, welcome to the Product Quest podcast.
Great. Thank you for having me. I love that bio. Can I have that?
People like our bios. That's one thing we get good feedback. We get good feedback about. So maybe that's one of our specialties. And Rob, we'll get into the job to be done stuff soon enough. But I have to say, I do think one of the most interesting things is owning a nightclub in New York City. Before we get into the job stuff, do you have any interesting stories from that era you'd be willing to share?
Sure. It was you don't have the limitations you do as you get older when you're young, right? You just say we can do this. And we all like going to bars and going out at night on the weekends. My friends and I in New York said we should open a bar, we should open a club. It's no different than someone else saying, I'm going to start a business around something else that you like. You're a fly fisherman. You want to do, we're going to start a fly fishing school or whatever that is, a passion. I'm not saying my passion was dancing or maybe a little bit of the drinking side, but it was just getting people together and having fun. And so a group of 10 of us, pooled our money and opened a nightclub in New York City. It was just craziness ensued after that. We were on the front page when we opened. We're on the front page of the New York Times worldwide. This was New York, London, Tokyo. Wow. Our picture on the front page. I should say that it's front page of the business section of the New York Times. And we had lines out the door. It was crazy because it was a kind of an anti-nightclub for New York's purposes. New York was the hip nightclubs. You had to be cool to get in. People would pick and choose to who got in. This was the Studio 54's days, or post that, but that Studio 54 kicked that whole milieu of who was going to be seen there at any given time. Well, we were just a bunch of people working in New York in financial services, a lot of Wall Streeters. We just said we want a nightclub that we can get into. So we built for a different target demographic, a different segment. Yeah. Now, I didn't know anything about segments back then. I'm just like, we want to build something for ourselves. We did, and it was very successful. It went for 10 years. I was only a part of that club for the first 2 years and opened another nightclub on the other side of Manhattan, and did that for another 3 years. But that's a young man's business. And by the time I turned 30, I was like, yeah, this is not, this is no longer for me. But it was fun. I learned a lot about business. It was an MBA times 2 in everything about it, from marketing to selling to organization and hiring. And it was very, very interesting. I met a lot of great people. I met some famous people. And yeah, just it was a youthful endeavor, and I'm glad I did it, and I'm glad I got out of it.
Any events like the day that Bob Dylan walked in, or
oh yeah, I have so many of those. One day, I'm at the bar and I go, that guy looks just like Billy Idol, and it was Billy Idol's in a bar of preppy New Yorkers sitting there. He just walked in. The doorman recognized him and go, Billy, come on in. And they brought him downstairs, and he hung out all night long, danced by himself. This is we our location on the west side was fantastic. It was 72nd and Columbus, and everyone would walk by. Mike Tyson liked to eat at a Cuban restaurant 2 doors down, so we'd joke with him as he walked by. He was a very, very affable guy.
Yeah.
In the right context, I imagine. But what's his name? Kevin Bacon and his wife lived right around the corner. They loved to dance. They'd come down, dance for a while, then just leave. It was just something they liked to do. So
you're just 1 degree of separation from Kevin Bacon.
Yes, I guess I am.
And
I didn't get to meet him. He was there, but I didn't get to meet him. I tried not to be too invasive to the celebrities that came, but we weren't a celebrity club at all. We had a lot of sports people come. A lot of the New York Rangers like to go there, and the hockey team, and some of the New York Knicks like to come there. So a few of the New York Mets baseball team like to come there as well. And they didn't get hassled, which was something that they really enjoyed. So yeah, it was fun.
That's excellent. I'm sure we could talk for hours about other stories in there.
And I know I had that thought, like I should open a bar. That's at least once I had that thought.
I think we all have.
Yeah.
Right. Well, somewhere along the line, you ran across a gentleman named Tony Owe, and you guys together really got Strategyn kicked off. I wonder, in a lot of our, we're not technically a Jobs We Done themed podcast, but we tend to talk about it a lot. So I think our listeners might be interested a bit in that. How did you meet Tony, and how did you originally learn about ODI?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about my career before
Sure.
Strategyn. After I did the nightclub business, I moved to California and worked at 4 different startups doing sales and marketing for them. 2 of them were minor successes, meaning we had exits and people got paid out and what have you. And 2 of them were just dismal failures. And I was coming off a dismal failure when I started thinking about like what makes one company successful and another not successful. We thought we had a great idea at this company that failed, and it still is a very good idea. It was very complex, and there's a lot of reasons a business will fail. Jobs to be done and outcome-driven innovation will help improve the likelihood of that success dramatically, but there's still a whole host of other things you've got to get right. And we didn't get those things right, nor do I think we actually had the outcomes down either for that. But whatever, I didn't know what those things were at the time. And so I spent a year working with another gentleman trying to turn QFD or QFD type model, quality functional deployment. Is that what the F is? I forget. It's been so long.
That's right. Yeah.
Into a software that could help us think about needs and get to the point where ultimately Tony was pointing at. I didn't know about that yet. So we started building the software, and everyone, when I told them we're making innovation software, everyone wanted to talk to me. I was pre-selling it before we'd built a lick of code. It was all slideware. But we were talking to a lot of people, so everyone wanted to talk to us. Turned out no one wanted the software. They said to us, we don't even know if innovation's a process. I mean, what's the software going to do for us? They're like, we don't know. They didn't know what they didn't know. They go, we would like you to come in and train us, or come in and help us and consult. And I'm like, well, I'm not sure I'm in that position to do that yet. I know there's a problem, and I think I found some ideas on how to maybe address that problem, but I really didn't have the underlying job to be done formulated. So I'm reading everything I can, and this article comes out, Turn Customer Insight into Innovation or Input. I read it, and I called him up. I just sent him an email, and then he said, yeah, I'd like to talk to you. I said, I want to license your model, because we're trying to build this software, and I need a model because, and I, having run sales and marketing for 4 different startups, one of the things I see happen all the time is people will create software around a problem, but they really don't have a process orientation around it. They'll be fixing points of that total job. there's some software out there now. I'll remain nameless. It's a very big software company, and they still don't have a good process orientation. Now, I guess you can be successful without it, but I know their customers are unhappy. Anyway, so I talked to Tony. I said, "Hey, I'd like to license it." He goes, "Well, I'm going to be in San Francisco. I was living in the Bay Area. I'm going to be in San Francisco next week. Let's have lunch." We did. He said, come on and work with me on this. I'll teach you how to do it." And so it was I killed the software project and went working with him. I thought I was going to do it for a year or two. Said, "I love the model. I think this would be like a superpower if I can master it." Took me a little longer to master than I thought, but we started to grow. And we got Microsoft as a big account, did something like 40 projects at Microsoft over the years. And we were just up to our eyeballs and we were just growing the business. So I just stayed. I like what I do. I like talking to a myriad of businesses. We've talked to companies in every walk of life you can imagine. Some crazy ones too. Sports betting, bananas. I know more about bananas than I ever thought I'd know from doing a project for Chiquita, and snack foods. But what is interesting, the more you do this and the more you work on these projects, the more you learn about business in general. And you find these patterns that are repeated across very different businesses. So when businesses says, "Well, have you ever done any work in my business?" And I say no, but it doesn't matter. I don't need to know your business. I need to understand who your customer is and where you're trying to create value. And that's the framework. That's why it's so powerful. Anyone who really internalizes jobs to be done thinking can start thinking about any business and understand some of the core fundamental principles of that business by understanding what they're trying to do for the customer. And so it's been a long 20 years of doing this and learning, but I still learn every week. I talk to customers. I'm building onto this database of patterns I have in my head, and jobs to be done for me has been one of the most kind of unifying and simplifying models I've come across. So I liken it akin to a philosophy.
You mentioned that some things took long to master. Could you go in a bit more detail? What was the hardest for you? What took so long to master?
Yeah. So jobs theory at the top level is very intuitive, very simple theory, right? I mean, when you hear it, you're like, that's it? That's the whole theory? Customers come to you because they've got an underlying job to be done? Yes, that's it. That's how simple it is. But what Tony did was said, there's something missing. There's this other element, this element below, these outcomes that describe the perfect execution of that job. The more precise you get on the outcomes, the more discrimination you're going to get in people saying if they're important or not important. Precision is the secret sauce of outcomes. So outcomes are written in words. Words have meaning, multiple meanings. There are multiple words in the English language that mean the same thing. So is it cash flow? Is it or is it debt, or is it credit? Those words can mean totally different things to people. So semantically, that was one of the challenging things. One is just making sure that you're consistent in the way you write your need statements. Hugely important. Second thing is turning off the idea part of your brain. We as humans love to jump to ideas. I mean, there's not been a company that we've talked to that have said, do you have a shortage of ideas? They've never said, yes, we have a shortage of ideas, ever, ever. And never will they, because we as humans think about ideas. So thinking about ideas, think about the idea jumps to the forefront of the need as opposed to the underlying outcome. And so needs get embedded into outcome statements accidentally. Here's an example. Monitor something. in an outcome statement. Minimize the time it takes to monitor something. Well, you have to ask yourself, why are you monitoring? Monitoring is a solution for something else. You're monitoring it. What happens if you didn't have to monitor it? You're really trying to detect if something is going to happen, or determine when something goes out of bounds of a range that you need to understand. That's a very esoteric one, but I want to use that example because that's how solutions insidiously insert themselves into outcome statements. So it took me a couple of years to get good at writing these. And what really got me good is when we had our extended teams in Europe, really going over hundreds of need statements with them was a great practice for me. So anyone who wants to learn this, it's like anything else: playing guitar, playing golf, fly fishing. You got to practice.
Can I just jump in here? I like this a lot, and I completely agree that, I mean, what really makes jobs be done fly is that outcome statement, is that addition to the thought. Like how do you measure actually how well a job gets done or not? Could you elaborate a bit? I like where, okay, maybe that I put it that way. Where I struggle very often is, how do you explain the value of precision? Like, because I think there is, and maybe I would wonder if you agree, we have a tendency as humans as well to not be precise, to speak very, very vaguely, to use terms that are extremely vague.
Yeah.
I mean, for example, easy is one of the most common ones. Like, of course, everybody wants things to be easy. And there is this idea that we understand what we mean by it, but it's extremely vague. So how, like, what's the value of precision?
Yeah. Well, we know when you have an abstract, let's call it a fat need statement, it's got easy in it or something.
Yeah.
You're not going to get precision when someone rates it. Make it easy to use. Yeah, it's important. Yeah, it's pretty well satisfied. You're just not going to get that as if there's probably 15 outcomes that describe easy. Now, we know this from one of the other early people to join Strategyn is a guy named Bob Panisi. He's still 20 plus years at Strategyn. He came over from Motorola. He'd been using Tony's model for 10 years prior to him joining. He had Tony at Motorola for years. Bob tells a story about he was working on the emergency radios, for police and firemen that use, and they were doing some studies on, trying to come up with new innovative features for them. And they said, we talked to all these firemen. They said, yeah, the basic thing is going to be easier to use.
Yeah,
And so Tony's like, yeah, but there's 10 or 15 things. It turned out there's like 17 or 20 qualities that were using this remote phone. And what they did was then they quantified them. And they saw there's 3 that made all the difference. And they changed the features to address those 3 precise measures of easy to use. And these guys have gloves on, when they're fighting fires, and they have to, actuate the buttons. It was 3 or 4 outcomes that changed the game, and Motorola released a bunch of products, and the products took over the market. That was because of precision, because exactly where they were struggling. There's a great author who wrote a book called, what's it? The Statue in the Stone.
That's a book I've have it somewhere.
I've heard of it.
Yeah, I've never heard of this.
but I love the way Scott put it in his book. Perfection is achieved by removing all the imperfection, or removing all the stone around that beautiful statue in the middle. That is the same thing for any product. Well, it's got to get the job done. How do you know to get the job done? You can't ask people to say, what's the perfect execution? If you ask them, they're going to tell you, well, this can't happen, and that can't happen. So when I do a project, that's ultimately what we're asking. What can go wrong as you do the job? People can talk in very precise ways at that point. Because then they go back, well, I was doing this and this happened. You say, well, why is that bad? Well, because of this. And why is that bad? Because of this. And all of a sudden we're at the outcome statement. And I know it seems like the 3 whys, but people in the business are afraid to ask these questions. They just taking down verbatims. The whole voice of the customer movement said, hey, go talk to your customers. They just didn't tell you what to ask them. They didn't tell you what was valuable.
Yeah, I
That
like
was
that
really
a lot. Sorry, go on.
I mean, that was just the big thing I learned from Tony. I mean, that I put it in the book, but I'm the curator. Right? It was completely his idea, but never thought of it on my own. We were you're talking about when you're going through outcome statements with somebody and you're critiquing them. And I was doing that with Tony. And I had one, it was like increase the likelihood of some good thing happening. And he's like, no, Scott, that's not what we're doing. We're minimizing the likelihood of some bad thing happening. The job is this thing we want to accomplish, all the outcomes. We're trying to understand everything that goes wrong. We get rid of that. What are we left with is perfection. That was a big aha. And that's all Tony Owen. It's in fact, just one of the, I mean, to me, that was such a leap forward in my own thinking. I mean, just if I interview a customer, what's everything that goes wrong? It's just sort of a mentality you keep throughout. And I've just, it's like anything. Once you sort of see this new thing, you can't unsee it. I can't see the world the way before Tony taught me that.
Don't you think people are naturally that way? I mean, let me ask you guys a question. When you're going to buy something on Amazon, what's the first thing you do?
Reviews. Look at reviews.
Yeah. And which reviews do you look at?
The worst and the best.
Yes.
Yeah,
But the worst first.
That's
The worst first.
I always look
Yeah.
at the worst.
Yeah, I look at the worst too. Why do you do that?
Yeah.
You know, I usually have very specific things I'm looking
That's
for.
true.
I have a very small subset. I'll give you an example. I'm shopping for wallets. I've had the same wallet for 22 years. Figure it's time. But there's a very specific need of why I'm looking for it is, well, now they have all these Apple trackers. They have wallets that will take this new Apple tracker device. I forget what it's called. And
Yeah.
a wallet's
Tag or
not something
something.
I want to lose. And so we can sit here and talk about what that outcome is, minimize likelihood of losing your wallet, something similar to that. It was to accomplish that outcome was even what put me in the market to begin with. Yeah.
But I do that with hotels as well. I always look at the worst and then see, kind of decide from there. But what I really like, I mean, and I think that is something like where if you actually do that process, if you talk to customers in that way and want to find out, you realize that exactly as you said, people speak that way. People think that way. So I think very often in business, we tend to, I mean, companies are made that way, that we think in abstract terms. Strategy is something very abstract or in broad terms, but where in fact people are tremendously concrete. So it's something very precise and concrete that makes the difference. And I think, I mean, if you ask the business people sitting in the meeting room how they go about their decisions when they go about buying products, of course they are very precise and know exactly why they buy one thing over the other. But the customer, come on. So I really like this, that I think this what could seem as a kind of overly precise way and strange way of speaking, that's exactly how people talk. If you know how to ask them, if you know how to kind of get it out of them, that's how they speak.
Yeah. Yeah. So going back to the model, if you get that and then you just wrestle with the semantics, because you do need to get precision, then you've got it. And that's what took me a couple of years to learn. But once you do it enough, it then starts to become pretty second nature. You start thinking this way. When you buy a product, you're like, why did they design it this way? Outcomes just start filling out of your head. Like, they've missed the boat on so many things here. Why is that?
This precision in words. I don't know if you guys have seen the show Larry David, Curb Your Enthusiasm, but there was you guys got to watch it. But anyways, there was one where Larry David was seeing an acupuncturist and he was very skeptical. He was very skeptical it was going to work. And so they made a bet. And the bet was, would he get better or not? And Larry said, well, I bet it was like $5,000 or something substantial. I bet you $5,000 this will not make me better. And then he saw the acupuncturist socially and just actually, so you feeling better? Larry said, yeah, I'm feeling better. And so, but when he answered it, Larry meant better as in improved. And the acupuncturist was like, oh, he's better. I win the bet. And so then they went in this argument. But it was because when he said he was better, better meant improved, as opposed to I'm better, meaning like completely cured. Sort of a funny little.
That is best because we didn't have precise outcomes describing better. Better is a fat word. It's
Right.
easy
Yeah.
to use.
Yeah.
Better.
Right. The is one topic we find that jobs to be done people often have different takes on is this idea of the emotional job. How are they important? How well do they fit? Practically speaking, are they worth gathering? So what's your take on the role of emotional jobs with a
Yeah.
study or just in our thinking?
I like the emotional job area. I don't think anyone's done it very well. I don't think anyone like there's some science and people have been, you have things attached to your head and they ask you questions and they can see where your body, gives positive and negative feedback
Yeah.
that's non-linguistic. And so people are trying to do those things. We have I think a rudimentary, but I think a powerful, I mean, we have a basic but powerful, I think powerful way of looking at them. Emotions there's a set of emotions. They're not unlimited. They're definable. Happy, confident, uh, fearful. These are all emotions. So there's a number of them, and we can document all of them. And some of them mean very similar. So I think you could probably boil it down to 30 emotions. I just made that number up, so don't take, but there's some number. So I'm going to use some financial examples because I do a lot of work in the financial services space, but when I do the job of manage monthly cash flow as a consumer, I want to feel confident. I want to feel wise. I want to feel uh, in control. Now, I shouldn't even do that when it's a little too much functional.
Yeah.
Feel, let's see, confident,
Okay,
wise.
empowered,
Was that?
like feeling empowered,
Empowered
something like
could be
that.
one. Yeah, yeah. Proud. I mean,
Proud.
yeah, whatever. Those things. So what we do is we look at those, but you don't, these emotions don't act on themselves. They act related to something. And so we say, when managing cash flow, how do you want to feel? Uh, Confident, avoid feeling fearful. So we measure them based upon the job. And then we can correlate between the outcomes and the emotional jobs. And we can say we've got some great work done. I have one on servicing a used vehicle. I mean, servicing a vehicle, and you look at these needs and you say these 5 emotional jobs. If you do these 5 outcomes really well, you can claim these emotional jobs in your marketing and positioning. And it was really very, very powerful. Now, you can't build a product around emotion. You communicate the value of your product around emotion at times, function and emotion. You don't want to be too skewed on the emotion. You don't want to be too skewed on the functional. You want to have a mix of both. But we have companies that come to us and go, yeah, but the job is really emotional. Can you study it with ODI? And I say no, because there's not outcomes on emotions. Emotions are tied to some event. If you're doing the job of managing cash flow, you can feel frustrated. You can feel fearful. You can feel confident. But you don't just walk around feeling fearful. I mean, some people do. That's called a phobia. It's not a normal state.
Yeah.
But it seems to me that a lot of the times when we talk about emotional jobs and jobs to be done, it's, as you say, a result of some functional realization, or something happens and you have an emotion. So, or you use a product and you feel confident because in the background, some functional outcomes have been solved that give you this feeling. But I'm wondering if there are some, and I'm not sure, I don't know if emotional jobs is really the right terminology, but some, let's call them emotions just for the sake of it, that are not, that don't emerge from some solving of a functional problem, let's say. So examples like, um, when you're buying a car, people will look at the car and say, well, that looks nice. That looks like a nice car. And I think one could argue that that really has a big impact on the sales. I mean, if a car looks nice, people will purchase it, and that cannot be captured, it seems to me, or I'd be curious to know what you think, in a kind of jobs approach. And also a lot of activities like listening to music, for example, not the experience of, okay, how do you play music, which is a well-known example, but I mean the actual experience of, I like this song and I don't like this song, or whatever.
Yeah.
Is this something we can use? Or for example, the film industry, watching a film, how can we apply jobs to be done in that context? So I was wondering if this is something that we can handle, or we should just say, well, no, that's out of the scope, and we should just let people be creative and not really define what that is.
Yeah, I would agree wholeheartedly. What you described though are subjective things: color, taste, design. Those are subjective. Music, it's subjective. Now, some will say this is better than this categorically because it's, there's so many instruments over here and it's just a bongo or whatever whatever they're using. They'll use some sort of functional things, but it is ultimately subjective. We're talking about core functional things that are objective. Taste, smell, sight, those are senses and they're subjective and what people like. I've got a blue shirt on. You've got a dark sweater on. These are subjective choices that we make, and outcome-driven innovation and jobs to be done has nothing to say about that. Zero. Like we do work with food companies. Food is highly functional, but it's highly subjective too, right? Taste is totally subjective. Now we know that some stuff's hot and some stuff's sour and some stuff's sweet. We know that. That's objective. But the subjective stuff is how you like it. And so we don't ever work on the food to make it taste better. But we do work with food companies on the functional elements of food. And there's a whole movement now about functional foods. They're getting it. But I agree. We wouldn't do jewelry. We've done some clothing. Clothing has become much more functional. You have like phones for your iPhone, pockets for your iPhone, or heaters in your gloves or what have you. So they're becoming more functional, but the design side, we have nothing to say.
And I like that a lot. I mean, but would you say, for example, in things like jewelry, the thing I'm always struggling with is perfume. That's also kind of in this more ethereal space. But would you say there is always a functional aspect to it, no? Like that we can study. I mean, jewelry is the things like I'm putting it on and I squeeze my skin or stuff. So there is functional aspects always.
That's the consumption of it. Yeah, yeah.
But maybe there is a space, or I don't know, an industry where it's not about that. So you could you design a winning piece of music with jobs to be done or not? That would be subjective.
Well, I was trying to do that. Chat GPT, right? Or whatever that is. Is it GPT?
Yeah. GPT, right. I think.
Yeah. And so I put it in some parameters and it gave me a pretty lousy country song. But then our friend John put it in, Scott, and it was a much better one. He put in more parameters and actually, but it was no music associated with it. It's just lyrics. Can you do this? I think you could use outcomes, jobs, ODI, outcome-driven innovation, jobs and outcomes in things like movies for kids. But it's not about the movie. It's about what the parents want the kids to learn from the movie, highly functional.
Yeah.
They want to learn values. They want to learn. They have metrics for that. Minimize the likelihood that concepts that we don't think our children are ready for are introduced in the
Yeah.
and it's
I agree.
happening. And I
Yeah.
think, to your Disney post, Scott, they're doing stuff that I think a lot of parents don't actually want. And that's functional.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with the story. So, and there are good story arcs. I think there's function in a story arc. You could
Yeah.
create outcomes around a story arc. It wouldn't tell you what to fill in there, but there is
Yeah.
things that we like, as humans. We like to be suspenseful, and we like problems to be resolved in the end. And so those are pretty
Yeah.
well known.
Yeah. No, I like that a lot. I completely agree. And I think maybe there we sometimes we make people angry, but I think you could even say something like, okay, I'm going to do something very terrible, but you could take something like love, or in that space, or so the way I was thinking about perfume was always, I mean, to attract somebody else, or to make somebody like find me attractive, or however you want to then phrase it in the end, that's highly functional.
Right.
We think of that as something very emotional, but look at the behavior of people. It's very
Yeah.
functional. We
Yes,
think a
but
lot
the but
about
the
this concrete
but
out. I think there's outcomes attached to that. So
well, I agree with you on that, on the perfume. I definitely think, I mean, that is one of the functional reasons we would use it, but it's then obviously very difficult to define the outcomes, because this is where you kind of get blocked, because I mean, how can you define outcomes on the smell of a perfume? It's again very subjective.
Yeah.
yeah, but
We,
well, sorry, go on.
no, I would just say on the perfume side, it would be very limited. It'd be like minimize the likelihood that the smell overwhelms people around me, minimize the likelihood that the smell passes on to others who may not want it, or makes someone who triggers an allergic reaction. These are highly functional
Yeah,
around it, but it had nothing to do with designing the perfect perfume, the smell, or it and we just did a study on this in freshening air in a room.
ah,
Highly functional, but had
yeah,
nothing to do with the smell. We didn't say it had to be rose or lilac, or it had nothing to do with that. It had everything to do with uh, how it was dispersed and consumed and lingered and didn't stain things. It was highly functional.
This
yeah,
actually
So
brings us, sorry, to a topic of approaching a new market and trying to determine how jobs to be done would be applied to it. And we use the term framing. And Rob, as leading business development at Strategyn for 20 years, is probably framed more projects than anybody else on earth. Rob, I wonder, first of all, if you give us a definition of how you would define framing, and then give us a sense of how to do it well. What are some things to think about when you want to frame a project?
Yeah. Well, let me just say, every company who's building a product or service is doing it around some job that the customer wants to get done. That's why they're giving you money. This goes back to Adam Smith, Wealth of Nations sort of stuff, exchange of value for something, right? So there's that underlying job. So you want to frame a product around the job. Sometimes it's incredibly intuitive and it's not a problem. Sometimes it's not intuitive. And it's also based upon what the customer, our client, is trying to get done. Not the end customer, but what is our client trying to get done? So if you're trying to create the next version of a product and you're not going to innovate off of that product platform, then your framing should be closer to the product, because the needs will be very precise around the platform. There's nothing wrong with that. So when Tony did work for Bosch on the circular saw, the job was cut wood in a straight line. Well, indicates sort of the platform, doesn't it? Didn't say separate wood or divide wood into shapes. It said cut. So it assumed a saw and the dimension. And that was fine. They made it an award-winning saw from studying that. But if someone wants to come up and say, we really just want to separate wood in perfect angle, separate wood in various shapes, then everything would be on the table. And a laser or water and sand cutting tool or whatever those things are could come out as a potential solution. So framing is just getting who is the job executor and what is the job they're trying to get done. Now, getting the job executor in B2B can be challenging for our clients. It's not so much for us, but it is for them. I'll talk about that in a second. So understanding who the job executor is and what the job is. But the job is going to be framed on what you're trying to do. So I have a client, a big financial institution who helps people save for retirement. They wanted to go beyond that. They wanted to take that job. Saving for retirement is really saving towards a goal. And so they just wanted to make it more abstract around saving for anything, to basically achieving a financial goal.
Yeah.
So we studied that, but they went in eyes wide open. It was less about retirement. It was around saving for any goal, achieving a financial goal. That was their thing. That was their desire, their goal. And so we elevated it up a little bit. Clients often will say these very abstract jobs like be happy in life or be successful. You can get outcomes on that, but they'll be incredibly obtuse. So you don't want to. The basic is, what are you trying to achieve? We frame based upon what they are trying to achieve. If you go and practice framing a project, like our clients struggle all the time. And they're like, well, should it be this? And I say, well, what, I ask a couple of questions about goals. And all of a sudden we've gone from way up here right back down, because they're not going to go create a laser to cut wood. No, they're going to create a saw that's electric, that, and it's, so you get the general idea. It's framing is hard when the job is, when they're so focused on their products that they can't see the forest through the trees. Meaning at a bank, this is a classic example. Banks have credit cards, debit cards, checking accounts, savings accounts, short-term loans. These are all products in service of managing cash flow. They have no division in the bank called managed cash flow, but they have divisions for credit cards and debit cards and savings accounts, and they don't even talk to each other inside the business. Now, isn't this crazy? Don't you think there should be someone in a bank that's the head of managed cash flow? Because then you're just looking for the next solution that helps people do this. And it's not so disparate. It's not the credit card, the debit card, and it's needlessly complex for the consumer. And it's a unifying. That's why I say jobs to be done should be a simplifying principle, not a complicating principle. Anything that is of value should be simplifying in essence. Now, some of it is hard as you practice it, but the principle is incredibly simple. So in a bank, what happens if you put everything under managed cash flow as a division? I guarantee you the business is going to work better. They're going to come up with ideas they would have never thought of. But that's because we're trying to do the whole job on one platform. But it's not in the bank's interest. It's not in the financial institution's interest. What credit card company have you used that when you're about to buy something called you up and said, wait a minute, Scott, Jan, don't buy that.
Don't spend that money.
Of course not.
Yeah.
But the first credit card company, and you can have them now on your phone, right? Your Apple credit card. So it knows by proximity that you're at the Target store or you're at Dick's Sporting Goods and you're about to buy something. It'd say, you've already spent too much this month, Rob. Don't buy it.
Yeah. Now
that is helping me manage my cash flow better. Now, is the credit card company incented to do that? Is the bank incented to do that? No, no one's incented to do it. I guarantee you, if someone comes up with that, they're going to take a slice of the market right off. Those people who really want to manage your cash flow more aggressively.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I digressed off of the framing, but the framing is about the job executor, and what the customer's goals are. Some are intuitive, like, let's see, a real intuitive one. I'll have to think about it. I have the more, the more nebulous ones in the top of my head. Like when we did the cash flow one, the bank wanted us to improve their savings accounts and checking accounts. And we said, yeah, but let's have a bigger picture of what let's have the real picture of what the customer is trying to get done. Or we did one for a transmission company that makes transmissions, and that is to transfer power. That's the job. So yeah. Any other questions or thoughts on that? I mean, I struggle with this at times too. It does
Yeah.
it sometimes you have to really think very deeply about it. I'll tell a customer up front, we need to think about this. And we get a group of people together, we bounce ideas off of each other, we think about their goals. And here's one. Sports betting company came to us. And they said, well, betting enhances. Now this is a challenging one. Betting enhances the enjoyment of the sport. So we really want to study enjoying the sport more. Like, you're a betting company. Your platform is betting. So that one was a tough one. We had to really think about it. We went back and forth, got Tony in on this one. The way we framed it was win a bet on an outcome of an event. You don't bet to lose. You bet to win.
Yeah.
I think I do, if I do.
Yeah.
And we said an outcome of an event. So it could be basketball, football, it could be horse racing, whatever that is. But embedded in that are the things that you might do to understand to make a better decision on placing that bet.
Yeah.
And so the outcomes we got would very much indicate how you might enhance their enjoyment, because you'd give them information, you'd keep them up to date, but if you studied it at like, help me, people, why do people bet? To enjoy the sport more. That is subjective.
And they would go, I love this because they would go in very different direction. I mean, sometimes I experience that clients have hard time to imagine, like to be aware of the implications that it has. Because if you say enjoy a sport more, then you would go into the direction of beers, less waiting time, all that kind of stuff, which helps me or some people enjoy their sport more. Right. So how long do I have to wait in the line to the toilet? That's kind of,
yeah.
So, but that's not what you want to know as a betting company.
That's
and
right.
I love this. I love this example. So I think there is a lot in there's a lot of value in that, because you have to think about, and in jobs you don't give you the language to do this, to think about the implications of the perspective that you take. I think very often that step of framing is jumped over, and we all assume that we know what we mean, we know the direction that we're going. But just that example that you showed there, it for me, that goes into two completely different directions. If you would come up with completely different ideas if you would go to enjoy the sport more. So I like that a lot.
Yeah.
I find myself with a couple of challenges, and Rob, I wonder your thoughts on it. One is, if somebody has just read about jobs to be done, becomes very excited about it, their tendency is to go a bit too high. They want to get far from their solution, so they go a bit too abstract. Maybe that's similar to enjoy the sport. There's the opposite of that, where they're just laser-eyed on their product. It's really about this thing that they buy. And then I find that as a challenge. And the other thing, if let's say there's 4 or 5 stakeholders in the company you want to create value for, they might not all, some might think it's higher and some might think it should be lower, and having to, and honestly, it could be like, there could be multiple like good answers. I don't know what's the perfect one, but navigating that conversation amongst their disagreements and getting to this difficulty of high versus low, that's an area of executing this process I wish I could do better or faster or something. My sort of solution to it is to say, hey, let's take a lot of time to talk about this, and really be. But anyway, that's what What advice do
Yeah.
you have for me?
Yeah. Well, I suffer, you're describing, I think, the natural challenge of framing and the conversations with companies. But what you're really hitting on is there's no alignment on the team, and you have to bring them into alignment. So COVID's changed a lot. And and one of those things is we don't meet with our clients at the kickoff of a project anymore. We used to always. And what we did there was we made sure we vetted the framing. And I had been in a framing one time for a medical device company that took 6 hours. We had 20 people in the room. We had too many people, but we had to get them aligned. This is about alignment. This was a dysfunction in the business that we had to bring the alignment around. The framing actually helped them see that. And we said, okay, we want to do this. And we said, okay, if you do this, you'll get this and this, but you won't get that. And then we said, okay, we want to do this. And we made those trade-offs around and around. And at the end, they go, this makes the most sense for us now. They were very thankful that we spent 6 hours in framing it. But today we have to, so we're doing this asynchronously, Scott. We're doing this, I'll have a call. I just had another interesting call with another sports betting company. And so I had an hour, it was supposed to be a 30-minute call, went an hour. It's just fascinating. I love hearing about their business and what they're doing and explaining how we might approach this. We're going to have another hour-long call next week to frame that project. And a framing isn't done until we go validate that hypothesis, that hypothesized framing with real customers. So we'll put it in the proposal to them. We'll say, this is what it is. We're going to win a bet on an outcome of an event. But then we're going to go talk to customers and we're going to validate that. And we've had times where customers go, that's not really it. It's this. And a light bulb goes off for us as well. We had one of those in the tax preparation software space. So they make software for accountants called Tax Pros to do our Scott and my U.S. taxes, right? And so we asked our customer, what do you think the job is? And they say, prepare taxes. Okay, so we went on our happy, merry way. We started talking to customers, the tax pros, and they said, that's a small part of our business. The job is really to devise and implement tax saving strategies. You see how that's different? It's fundamentally different. The tax prep is like 2 steps in a 10-step. And this was illuminating for our client because it freed them to say, we should be in a whole bunch of other things around tax. It's not just tax, but it really gave them a much broader room to play that they were contemplating it, but when they heard it and they saw the needs, they're like, oh yes, this is going to change the way we go to market.
Yeah. So 2 tips I believe I heard in particular there. One is if you're to navigate the conversation of how high or how low, make sure they understand the trade-offs, what they're going to get at various levels. That sounds useful. The other thing, it sounds like you're allocating some time of the qualitative interviews to validate, and then that would mean you would, I don't know if validate's the right word, but to reconsider, maybe reevaluate, and then sort of continue that conversation with the company. You're allowing for it to change, maybe to tighten or shift a bit during the first bit.
Yeah, we bring that validation or change back to the client before we go deep into the qualitative research. We do a couple of interviews up front. I know it doesn't sound like a lot, but it can be just enough to get us like, we forgot something here, or we're missing something. They really nailed it. And then we go back, we say this, and to our client, then we go deep into that. So it's just good. I think it's just good project.
I really
protocol.
like this also. Like one tip. I mean, I remember one project where it was really, I mean, there was like no alignment in the team. There was a med tech company, no alignment at all. Very difficult. We did interviews with them. So like we spent an hour with each of the stakeholders just to get their thoughts and all that kind of, and it didn't work in the end. But we thought, okay, what to do? Now you can spend months trying to fix the alignment. What we then did is exactly what you proposed and said, we don't know. So we go out to the customer I mean, in the end, it's them who we need to ask. So you can go out there, you might have a hypothesis here and there, but let's stop the discussion, the internal discussion, because we were apparently never going to agree. So let's go out, talk to the customer. Worst case, they will tell us.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, it starts with the product or service that they're working from, the platform they're working from. But Scott, you started this conversation about it being a new product, a new job. Did you say that? Is that what you started?
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, so anyway, it's harder in those instances, but it's still very doable. There's not that many new jobs. We can talk about that, on a different track, but framing can be challenging, but if you get it right, it's freeing to the product teams. I'll give you an example. And this is one of the misconceptions about jobs to be done. So one of our big financial service clients, really great company, so smart. I love these people. I had a call with them one day and they said, Rob, we think we help our customers with hundreds of jobs. And I said, I don't think so. I think it's 6. I just made up the number on the call. But after that call, I gave it a lot of thought, and they called me back about 6 months later on something else. They go, oh, by the way, we agree with you. We think we help with 9 jobs. It goes back to this idea of customers coming to you for a reason. You think a step in this bigger job is the reason, but it's not. It's the job. And you get focused on credit when managed cash flow, that's just one step in the bigger job of managed cash flow. So they naturally think their market's much more complicated than it is. So it's a job to be done. I'll say it again, is a simplifying model, and it should be.
And how often do you need to go back on a framing or a job definition? Because if you've chosen a job and the ODI process is quite extensive and requires a lot of effort, if you've gone down that path, how often does it happen that you need to maybe revise your job, and how does that happen? How is usually in your experience the case that you think, no, the framing is not right here and we need to change?
Very rarely. And here's why. We go to great pains up front to make sure we get it right. This is not something you want to test with. It's not like, and I don't want to leave you the wrong impression. We make sure that it is 95+% before we go out. It's rare that we've got to come back because the company's in business. It's got a product. So that product's doing something. So we have a baseline. Then we say, well, what are your goals? So that gives us more information. Now what we're missing is, do customers see that, or do they see a bigger picture of that? And that's where our expertise comes in, because the job typically brings you up that level. So our customer might be, we want to cut wood with a saw blade. Okay, that's very distinctive to a platform. But if you want to separate wood, all of a sudden we've changed it. So, and then we go validate that with customers. But it's rare that we have to go back. So you have to ask the tough questions. You got to get alignment with the team. You have to ask what their goals are and make sure they're clear on those goals. That gives you great confidence of the job. At times, when our team is not aligned and they try to push us in this more amorphous job statement, and we just did this. We're just finishing up a project now that it took us an extra month to do the qualitative research, because the job that they thought they wanted their customer to do, the customer said, that's not the job we're doing, and it's not the job we want. And so we had to go back, and we probably added a half a dozen interviews. But when we see that it's going off from what our original thing is, we stop and say, why is that? What did we learn from the customer that is making us reconsider this? And we knew in this one project that we're in right now, it was a customer's desire to fit what they had into something else. And I'll just leave it at that. but it was an alignment issue. Think about this. Every product or service has a job underlying it. So we've done this. I've done this thousands of times now. And so you say, well, what is that job? And you can get to it. It becomes pretty second nature. The first project I ever did was for a product called OneNote by Microsoft. And it was, I forget, let me think about what the framing was. But the job was something like remember something important. It was something like that. Or now that seems a little too abstract. I think it was down one around record something you must remember or something. And that's what we did. And it was phenomenal. And we looked at people who used pen and paper, people who used little tape recorders, people who used it on their laptop. These were all forms of things of helping them remember or record something that, that's important. It was transformational for the OneNote team because they were thinking about taking notes online. We said, no, you have to look at it irrespective of the platform. And it was a phenomenally successful project. The client was so happy when they launched the product. It listed the outcomes of note taking, half a dozen of them on the box of the product. This is when they sold software in boxes, but it was an homage to the outcome-driven innovation process. The group liked it so much because it was so precise about this job of recording information that you need to remember.
And so the bulk of this work of framing is done without talking to clients prior, and then you will go and so there's two questions. So that's my first question. The second question is, is there any existing process, or is there some approach you use to do this work with the end customer? So this framing. So if it's not something you do separately and without the customer, then what is the approach to actually discuss this with the customers?
Yeah, that's right. We do this at every project in the sense of we're validating everything all the time. So when we come to them for the sports betting one, we're talking to customers and say, is this what you're trying to do? We ask them about the job and they'll say, well, I might word, we don't really ask them to wordsmith it, but we'll hear from them. We'll go, oh, that's interesting what they said. And so we'll have our job, we'll have some things we heard. So and we're capturing outcomes around that core job simultaneously, but we'll hear something else. And by the third interview, we'll go, it's not exactly right. We should use this because this resonates more. And I go back to what we said in the beginning, semantics. This is a semantic discipline. Words matter. And so we want to make sure the job resonates, but that's not as important as getting the outcomes that resonate, because those are the things that we'll actually test. So as long as they're betting, the job framing is only as soon as we know it's stable, then we're getting outcomes. And who cares about the job statement now? Because we're going to test the outcome statements. We're no longer going to test the job statement. We know we're in the right ballpark. But if the wording puts us in a different bracket, then we have to really consider. But every interview, Jonathan, when we do, the first interviews, we're validating they think about the job this way.
Oh, I can jump in with another question. So we were talking about expanding an existing product line. And so the framing, I think you started talking about different situations with the client, where the client is in. And one, what we've been discussing, I think mainly is a situation where it's an established business with a certain product line, and they want to maybe expand this somehow or understand their clients better, something like this. And I was actually thinking, so what are the other situations you might be in? And maybe you guys can tell me if you agree with this, but the situations I come up with is there's no existing product. Someone lives his life, encounters some kind of issue or service that he was not satisfied with, and the person is entrepreneurial, so I'm going to do something better in that space. And the another situation which I think we encounter, for instance, a lot with this Web3 crypto stuff at the moment. There's some technology emerges, and people find it fun and start working on it. And I don't know if there's another situation where one might want to start framing. Maybe is a fourth one. But I wondered if you could comment on these two situations, and are they fundamentally different to the case where you've got an existing product line and business?
Yeah. So one is that you're hypothesizing a new market based upon a new job. It's a job that people maybe just have to start doing. Like protecting your identity on the web is a new job started back in when there was the web, 91, 90, 92, 93-ish area. That's a new job, right? New jobs don't come along that often, right? So you hear about all these fintech companies, they're still doing the same job that every other financial institution is doing. They're doing nothing different. They're doing it on a different technology. So the new job, if there is this new job, let's say, someone knows about it. Some doctor hypothesizes that he can remove a gallbladder in a different way. But you can still go to the job of removing a gallbladder. And so the new job, if it's truly a new job, then you have to ask someone who knows something about it, about doing the job. So when the web happened, you'd have to talk to people who were web experts, but you had people who didn't even know about the job yet. That one is the market is going to come around over time, but you can hypothesize, well, if you put your information out there, you don't want it to get stolen. Like, what kind of information might you put out there? Well, credit card numbers, perhaps, your address. You can ask these questions about these emerging markets. So I did a project 18 years ago, and it was on the smart home. So technology was just really starting to come out. Like people were having Wi-Fi in their home, and they're like, wow, this could really revolutionize the home. So we didn't go and ask people like anything around the technology. We said, and this was a crazy way to interview people, but it worked really well. We said, if your home was smart and it could talk to you and tell you things, what would it tell you? Well, they said, it'd tell me if we had a leak while we were away on vacation. It would tell me that I'm using too much energy when no one's there. It would tell me if someone came to my door when no one was home. That job, determine if someone's come to your house when no one's home, was the number one job 18 years ago.
And there's this company, I forget the name, that actually sold for
Ring,
billions.
Ring,
exactly. Ring,
which Amazon bought for a $1.2 billion. So we identified a very, very lucrative market. And back then, 18 years ago, it was you had to wire a camera and get some electrician to drill it, and then you had to pull cable through your house to some closet with the DVR, the videotape cassette would be recording it. I mean, it wasn't easy, but the technology caught up to the job. The people knew of the job.
Yeah.
The technology didn't catch up. Now, Jonathan, your second part was, what about a technology that doesn't have a home yet? Well, I think the whole, what's the cyber, not Bitcoin, but just basically the ledger, the
blockchain.
Yeah, blockchain. Blockchain is a technology in search of problems. Yeah. Like, and one of the things that came to me was, we pay for deed insurance when you buy homes. You have to, in America, you have to make sure that no one's encroached on your deed of your home. It's a racket. I've lived in my house for 16 years. There's nothing. I mean, but I'll have to, if someone buys this, they'll have to go through some due diligence to do this. Well, blockchain could have every transaction in there and show that nothing's been tampered with and nothing's been added to it or taken away. There's a job, but I'm looking for jobs where validity and security of the data is important. And that's how you do this. When you see a new technology, you say, okay, what are the benefits? What might be some of the benefits of those technology? And we had companies come to us and said, we've got this technology. We'd like to see where it might go. We say, okay, well, what do you think the benefits of it are? We see this in chemicals and material science. They say, what do you think it'll help people do? Then you have to go find people who are doing jobs that might require those benefits. That's much harder. You shouldn't be creating stuff that you don't know where it's going to go. That's my first rule. The second rule is it's going to be really hard to figure that out. You can figure it out. It takes some thinking. And again, this is all the model of saying, what are the benefits? And then we try to bring it down to the outcome level. Then we go say, when you're doing this thing, this job, are these outcomes important to you? And if they are, then we can go back to our client and go, yes, you're onto something, or no, they said that's not important.
Now that we've got those first couple rules, that leads me to a question I had. If we were going to have Rob's rules of innovation, if we're going to send a ghostwriter, or you're going to write your book on innovation, what are some of the major themes? It could be ODI related or completely outside of that. What are the major themes that you'd put in there?
Yeah, the organization gets in the way of a lot of good work. And Scott, you can talk at volumes. We could get Scott Adams on here, and he could talk about his Dilbert days at Pac Bell. The organization can really frustrate good things from happening. And it's not, I shouldn't say you have organizational designs one, and you've got old thinking, it's another. And the old thinking takes a long time to displace. So you can tell them about jobs thinking and show them the precision of outcomes and show this is exactly where they want to create value. And someone goes, yeah, but I want to build this. And so it can undo a lot of good work. I'd say one of my rules for innovators are go slow up front and everything downstream goes much faster. And this gets back to jobs thinking and outcome-driven innovation. People go, I had a big tech company, you'd know the name if I won't say it, came to us and said, we have to have our 5-year strategy done in the next 4 weeks. We need your help. And I said, okay, tell me more. We went through it. I go, this will take us 5 months. And they go, you're insane. I'm like, I'm not taking this job on because I'm not going to help them. I'm not going to put myself in front of the senior leadership of this big tech company and have little insights. They called me back 5 weeks later. They go, okay, we satisfied the leadership. We liked what you say. We do have to go slow to go fast. We showed them. We looked at all of it was a very unique project we did. It showed them with great precision where to go. And they have followed through in spades. It's been phenomenal to watch. But this stuff takes time. They think it takes time. Here's the mistake. It takes way more time fixing stuff downstream. 10 times the amount and the cost. They like, oh, your fees, they're expensive. Oh, my fees are nothing compared to a failed product. One of our clients told us about a $35 million failure they just had. They go, that's why you're here. I go, I wish you called us long before that. Yeah. Because if you pick the market and you understand the needs, you know that the stuff that you're putting into development is going to come out the other side. The only thing you have to figure out there is the design, which is important. And, design and pricing, very important. But what's more important? Not doing the right need and designing something beautifully, or getting the right needs and designing something subpar. They'll buy the subpar product if it's doing a felt need. They will not buy the beautifully designed product, or they won't buy it for long if it's not meeting their needs. So it's this, you have to flip the switch. You got to say, listen, every one of my companies that we work with, you go, do you have too little in development? And they laugh. We have way too much in development. Well, why is that? That means either one of two things. You've got more opportunities for growth, proven opportunities for growth, and you can deal with, in which case you need to raise money and hire people and get them out the door because you're going to win. Or you're working on stuff that's never going to see the light of day. It's one or the other. And now, obviously, some combination of that, but I do the polar opposites because it helps them make the decision going, you're right. We're working on stuff that will never be successful.
I'll buy that book.
Can we broadcast this for like, we need to find out other channels to broadcast this message.
Well, I mean, I think one thing you're really hitting on is the theme of the organization. The truth is executing jobs to be done in ODI. We enjoy getting into the minutiae of it, but in a lot of ways, I think it's the easy part. The harder part, I 100% agree. It's just the change management in the organization and getting people to understand the value and as you say, going slow before going fast. That's definitely a major challenge that for those that could unlock that would do a lot of good things.
Yeah. The irony is once you have the job and all the outcomes, you have them. And you can keep working on them over and over and over again. And John tells me, our friend John tells me that he keeps using the project that Scott did 10 years ago, 12 years ago. They say, we pull it out and look at it.
That's going on 15 years ago now.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like the philosopher Tom Petty said, not Tom Petty, Steve Miller, time keeps slipping into the future. Boy, I almost made a major musical error. I'm glad I caught that. It's like,
yeah, Tom Petty would be rolling over in his grave.
Steve Miller, time keeps slipping in. I'll share this. I was on a call with Tony one time, and we were just connecting for the first time in a while. I said, "How you doing, Scott?" I said, "Well, time keeps slipping into the future." He goes, "No, I think it keeps slipping into the past." And so I've been chewing on that ever since. Well, we're rolling down here towards the end now. Rob, anything else you'd like to let us know about before we land this plane?
I'd just like to say, well, one, I love what you guys are doing. I think we're in the heyday of innovation thought. I really do. When I started this with Tony 20 years ago, people said innovation isn't a process. People at 3M told me this. They go, it's serendipity. It's this, it's that. We said, no, it's not. Tony comes from an engineering background, Six Sigma. And he's like, no, you can apply these same principles. And so we've gotten to a point where jobs to be done is excited the market. People really get it. I mean, they get the idea that it doesn't have to be as complicated as they've made it. They don't get jobs to be done yet. I would love for that to be the case. They don't. But they get the idea that this is a powerful way to look at their market. It's freeing to them. Now comes the hard work with podcasts and blogs and really getting the word out. We're like evangelists. We have to tell people there's a simpler way to do this. And everyone benefits. Society benefits from this. We don't put out product that fail and that go into landfills, and we there's outcomes on all these things that we as humans would rather do better. So we've got the model. We've tested it over 20 years. It works. Now we just have to get other people to think about this and to slow down and make the right decisions. The right decision is so much better. It's so much more enjoyable than the wrong decisions. Take it from someone who's failed.
Yeah. I'll second that.
I love it. Perfect, Rob. Well, you can learn more about ODI with Rob's firm, Strategyn. It's www.strategyn.com. That's like strategy with an N, as in Nancy at the end. All right, Rob, we got one final question for you. This is just a little fun one. We're going to assemble our own innovation conference. We're going to have product managers. We're going to have leaders. We're going to make our big statement. We're going to fix this organization. But as part of the festivities, we're going to have them to watch a movie. What movie are we all going to watch together?
What movie would you all watch together? I don't know. That's a really, I'd want to think about that. That's, yeah.
I can so relate. I mean, I figured out innovation. That's fine, right? But picking a movie.
Yeah.
I wouldn't know what to say either, I don't think.
Yeah. I think that's the toughest question.
Well, you pick ones that you like, but then I want to pick one thought provoking. I'll just throw this one out because if you haven't watched it, it's really a crazy movie. The Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
Oh yeah, with Jim Carrey. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, it's a great
Lovely.
movie.
It's
Good
it's
choice.
it's a very it's a thought-provoking movie. Like I want to eradicate memories, but then they come back and they don't really want to. So anyway, it's
Yeah.
that'd
And
be
by the way, the Curb Your Enthusiasm with Larry David, I had never thought of that, but that's a brilliant response to that question because he's so observant. He observes all the little problems, and it's I also strongly recommend that series.
yeah. You have to have a high level of cringe factor though. I mean, like it's the stuff he
Yeah, for
says.
sure.
It's so bad.
He says the things we all think but don't necessarily say.
I hope I don't even think some of those things he says out loud.
I love the one where they're in line at an ice cream shop and they're giving free samples and there's some person in front of them is just, can I have a sample of this? Can I have a sample of this? And they're just sampling everything. And he's like, no, you're cut off. No more samples. It's fun. All right,
That's
well, Rob, thanks for taking time with us today.
I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Excellent. You're at ground zero for the top thinkers and jobs we've done at Strategyn. I love my time there. I've learned a ton from you over the years. And of course, very much appreciate your friendship, sir.
Oh, me too. Thanks, guys, for including me in this. This is fun. Let's do it again. We'll pick a different topic, though.
Let's do it again. Let's do it again. We'll dig into
All
this
right.
organization. We'll explore other movies. Maybe we'll just explore other movies. And I was expecting you to say Animal House. That's the one I thought was coming. It might not help with the conference, but if we enjoy it, then we're entertained, and that sometimes that's good enough.
Yeah.
All right. With that, friends, concludes today's Product Quest podcast. Reach out to us anytime at productquestpodcast@gmail.com. We will see you next time. You've got an excellent radio voice. You've got a good voice. Your voice.
Yeah, you do.
Or I sound like I'm getting ready to go harvest some corn or something on the back 8 acres. You've got a great voice for it.